man. And with all of those money moves made, it still feels like the price of a brick is going up. So, Perk, what was your reaction when Minnesota made these moves?
Oh, I love it. And I know it's a lot of people out there that got a lot of negative things to say about LaMelo Ball, but let me start off by saying this. When he's healthy and he's available, this young man is box office. He plays at an all-NBA level.
Picture the scene inside the Timberwolves facility the morning the LaMelo Ball trade went through. Reports describe actual elation in the building. One source didn't hedge, didn't qualify it, just said flatly that LaMelo's going to make everybody better, that he was the thing that was missing. You don't talk about a player like that unless you spent years staring at the exact hole he fills. And Minnesota had. John Krasinski reported the Wolves had been chasing LaMelo for 2 straight years. 2 years of trying. And on a Wednesday morning in late June, they finally got him. And here's the part that should have Wolves fans even more excited. LaMelo wasn't the only swing they hit. On the same draft week, Minnesota walked away with Isaiah Evans, a Duke sharpshooter that a lot of evaluators had pegged as a first-round talent. He didn't go in the first round though. He slid all the way down to the 33rd pick deep into the second round.
Number 33 to the Timberwolves, Isaiah Evans has left the green room and has now joined his new team, the Minnesota Timberwolves.
And the Wolves were sitting right there to scoop him up. A 6'6" movement shooter with a lightning quick release, the kind of pure scorer the NBA's own draft profile compared to a young Brandon Ingram. His head coach at Duke said he can get hot as fast as anyone he's ever coached, that you can feel the entire building react the second he sees one go in. Minnesota got that for the price of a second-round pick. So when you stack it up, this wasn't one move. It was a star-to-fix offense and a first-round caliber shooter landing in their lap on top of it. That kind of weight changes how you look at a franchise. And look, I get it. Every summer there's a team that wins the offseason on paper, gets everyone hyped, and then loses in the first round. Last year there were 5 of them. So when I tell you this Timberwolves team is genuinely different, I need you to understand that that's not me hopping on a bandwagon or telling you Minnesota is winning the title. Because I've been one of the more skeptical people about the Timberwolves core all along. I questioned whether running it back around Anthony Edwards would ever be enough. I've made the case that they were a really good team with a hard ceiling and no clear way to raise it. So when I say this team is not the same, that's not hype.
Edwards drives in on Wiggins. Oh my! Anthony Edwards! A serious racket!
That's me looking at the evidence and being honest about what's changed. Because maybe there was a little more vision behind this front office than I gave him credit for. What I really want to talk about today is what happened. Because when you really dig into what Minnesota actually did this offseason, 3 things stand out that go way beyond than they just added a star. There's a sacrifice at the top of the roster that contending teams almost never make. There's a structural problem that ended their season 3 years in a row, and they finally went and solved it. And then there's what all that unlocks for Anthony Edwards. By the end of this video, you're going to be able to understand why this version of the Timberwolves is structurally different from every version that came before it. Not so much different on paper, but different in the ways that actually matter when it gets to May and June. So let's get into it. To understand what's happening right now, you have to go back to the night their season ended. The Timberwolves have just been bounced from the playoffs by the San Antonio Spurs, and it wasn't even close. San Antonio jumped on them early, and by the time the second half, it was a blowout. And here's the part that makes it sting more, not less. Anthony Edwards was playing that series on one leg, hobbling through a real injury. And Minnesota still pushed the eventual Western Conference champion Spurs to 6 games. So this wasn't a team that got exposed as frauds. This was a team that ran out of help. And after the final loss, Edwards sits in front of the cameras and instead of deflecting, he basically diagnoses the whole thing himself. He talks about the team needing to listen better, about building championship habits in the regular season instead of waiting for the playoffs, about a group that kept trying to do everything on its own. That quote got framed as frustration at the time, and honestly, fair enough. It sounds like a star venting after a season-ending loss. But what it actually was, looking back, was a top 5 player telling his front office the truth. The core problem with the team was never talent. They had talent. The problem was structure. Edwards is one of the best scorers alive. He averaged 28.8 points a game last year, knocked down 323s, and became the youngest player in NBA history to reach 1,000 career threes. He's a superstar in every sense of the word. But for years, the honest read on Minnesota was the same every spring. Who creates offense when Edwards sits, and who creates for Edwards when a playoff defense loads up and dares anyone else to beat them? And let me answer that for you. Nobody. That was the answer. Nobody. You saw it in that final series. Edwards would get his, but the offense too often came down to him taking tough shot after tough shot while the other team generated clean looks in the flow of their sets. And it's not like this was new. Minnesota went to the Western Conference Finals in back-to-back years, in 2024 and 2025, and both those runs died the same way. A more complete star with more help simply outdueling Ant when the series tightened. In 2024, it was Luka Doncic, who outscored him, out-rebounded him, and out-assisted him in that conference finals. In 2025, it was SJ and a deeper Oklahoma City Thunder team, throwing wave after wave of double teams at him with no second creator to punish them. Then in this past season, the step back, out in the second round to the Spurs. Different round, same lesson. Edwards was brilliant, and it still wasn't enough, because brilliance from one man doesn't beat structure from a whole team. That's not on Edwards. That's a signature of a roster with one elite creator and a pile of complementary pieces around him. And the entire history of the NBA is one long, expensive lesson of that exact truth. One star and a good supporting cast gets you to the door, and almost never gets you through it. The Lakers learned it, the Trailblazers learned it. Half the league has a graveyard of 50-win teams that topped out in round 2 because they never found the second guy. Minnesota has been knocking on that door for 3 straight seasons. And then this summer, the front office stopped knocking and kicked it in. There was even a moment this offseason where the conversation turned to Edwards himself. The summer always needs a main character. And once Giannis got dealt to Miami, the drums started beating about whether Minnesota's franchise player might eventually want out, the way great players before him have when the supporting cast couldn't keep up. The people close to him shut it down, and by every account, he still sees himself as the long-term cornerstone piece in Minnesota. But the fact that the conversation existed at all tells you how much pressure had built up. Put yourself in Ant's shoes for a second. 2 years ago, the Wolves traded away Karl Anthony Towns, his all-star running mate, to get under the apron. This past June, Edwards had to sit and watch the same Karl Anthony Towns win an NBA championship in New York. His old co-star is an NBA champion, and Ant is not. He has made it clear that he wants to win, and he wants to win now. When a player this good keeps hitting the same wall and watching everyone around him pass by, eventually the franchise has to choose. Keep hoping, or change the pieces. Minnesota chose to change the pieces. So let's talk about reason number 1, the sacrifice. Because this is the part that almost never happens. It started on draft eve, but the move that looked at a glance like a downgrade. Minnesota traded Julius Randle, a recent All-Star forward, to the Brooklyn Nets, sending him and the 28th pick, and dropping all the way back to the 33rd pick. Now, on the surface, that's an All-Star forward for a second-round pick. That looks bad, but it wasn't a basketball move. It was a financial surgery. Randle was owed north of $33 million, and by routing him through a deal with the 2 teams that had the most cap space in the league, the Wolves shed every dollar of that salary without taking back guaranteed money. That single move dropped them tens of millions of dollars below the tax line and well under the apron, and it handed them the flexibility to go do something enormous. They also locked up guard Ayo Dosunmu on a new long-term deal in the same window. The table was being set, you just couldn't see the whole meal yet. And then came the big part that hurt. To get LaMelo Ball, Minnesota had to give up Naz Reid, the reigning fan favorite, a 6th Man of the Year winner, a guy that the city of Minnesota truly loved. They sent him to Charlotte along with a haul of picks, an unprotected first round in 2033, swaps in 28, 29, and 2030, and a bundle of seconds on the top. That is the brutal piece, and that price is exactly the point. Teams that are content with their ceiling do not move a beloved rotation centerpiece in an unprotected pick 7 years into the future. You only do that when you've looked yourself in the mirror and you decide the window is now, and you're done waiting for it to open on its own. Sacrifice is easy to talk about. Almost nobody actually does it. Minnesota did. And that's reason number 1 why this is not the same Timberwolves team. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you this front office has always been flawless, because it hasn't. Remember a year ago, they let Nickeil Alexander-Walker walk for almost nothing, a rock-solid 2-way guard on an affordable deal, and then watched him go to Atlanta and win Most Improved Player, averaging nearly 21 points a game. They chose to keep paying Julius Randle instead. That was a mistake, a real one, the kind of cheap help Edwards desperately needed and didn't get. But that's actually part of why this LaMelo swing matters so much. It's a front office that knows it can't afford another whiff, taking its biggest shot yet to make up for the ones it missed. Now, reason number 2. They solved the one thing that kept ending their season. Because the offense was never going to fix itself. Stars get buckets, and Edwards got plenty. But every time Minnesota needed a half-court bucket against a set defense in a playoff series, when the game slowed down and the other team took the ball out of Ant's hands, the well ran dry. They didn't have a second engine. They didn't have a guy the opposing defense feared when Edwards rested. For years, that was the flaw scouts circled every February, and it was the flaw that showed up every single postseason. LaMelo Ball is the direct answer to that flaw. And here's what matters about him for anyone who hasn't watched him closely. He was healthy last season, the first time in a while, and he put up 20.1 points, 7.1 assists, and 4.8 rebounds a night across 72 games for a bad Charlotte Hornets team. That assist number is the whole thing. He's a primary creator who can run an offense, bend a defense out of shape, and generate easy, in-rhythm looks for everyone around him. He's exactly the kind of player Minnesota never had, which is why their offense used to vanish into thin air the moment Edwards sat down or got swarmed. LaMelo was the third pick of the 2020 draft. Edwards was the first pick of that same draft. The number 1 and number 3 selections from one of the best draft classes in years now are sharing the same backcourt. And think about how badly Minnesota wanted to make this happen. The Timberwolves had been after this guy for 2 years. When they finally landed him, the word out of the building wasn't cautious optimism. It was elation. A source called him the missing piece, the thing that makes everybody better. That's not how you talk about a luxury addition. That's how you talk about the answer to a question that's haunted you for 3 straight playoff exits. LaMelo's scoring actually dropped last season, from around 25 a game down to 20.1. On the surface that looks like a step back, but look closer. He played fewer minutes and took fewer shots willingly to let Charlotte's younger guys develop. That's not a decline. That's a ball-dominant guard showing he can dial it back and share, which is exactly what you want to hear before you pair him up with another star who needs the ball. There's real reason to believe this isn't going to be an ego war between Ant and Melo. It's a creator who's already shown that he'll sacrifice usage, walking into a situation with a clear number 1 in Edwards. And here's the detail worth sitting with, because I think people are going to gloss over it. The thing that broke Minnesota in the playoffs wasn't the first quarter. It was the fourth. It was the half court, the defense knows what's coming, everybody watching Ant possessions where the offense turned to mud. That is the precise situation a creator like LaMelo exists to solve. A guy who can get to his spot, manipulate a defense, and create a clean look when the shot clock is bleeding out and the building is loud. Minnesota didn't add a score they didn't need. They added the exact skill that vanished from their offense in the most important minutes of their season. And that's reason number 2 of why this is not the same Timberwolves team. Now, here's where I need you to stop, because I can already hear the objection, and it's a fair one. LaMelo Ball cannot guard anybody. That's not a hot take, that's just true. The advanced numbers paint him as one of the most elite offensive creators in the entire league, and in the same breath, one of the worst individual defenders. And Anthony Edwards, for all his athletic gifts, gambles and grades out as a minus defender himself. So the natural fear is obvious. You put LaMelo and Ant in the same backcourt, and sure, they'll light up the scoreboard, but are the Wolves about to become a team that has to win every game 125 to 120? Can this team possibly get a stop when it matters? And this is the part that separates a panic move from a plan, because Minnesota did not gut its defense to make this trade. Look at what survived. Jaden McDaniels, one of the best wing defenders in basketball, the guy who takes the toughest perimeter assignment every single night, is still here. Rudy Gobert, a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year who was first-team All-Defense again last season, is still here. They did not have to include Gobert in this deal, and that might be the most underrated part of this whole thing, because it has been proven over and over that Gobert's presence is the thing that makes this team's defense actually work. And in Ayo Dosunmu, they've got another guard who can genuinely defend. The defensive backbone didn't get traded, it got reinforced. But here's the real kicker, the thing that should calm the Wolves fans down completely. They have already done this. In both of the Western Conference final runs in 24 and 25, Minnesota started Mike Conley at point guard. And by that point in his career, Conley was a defensive liability. He lost a step. He really couldn't stay in front of anyone. And he was out there almost purely to facilitate and provide veteran IQ, averaging just a handful of points a game in those playoff runs. The Timberwolves have already proven they can reach the conference finals while hiding a defensive minus at the point guard spot. So now they take the exact same spot, and instead of aging Connelly, they plug in a 24-year-old all-star creator who's about to enter his prime. That's not adding a defensive problem they've never had, that's upgrading a position they were already willing to punt on defensively, and getting a massive offensive return for it. When you frame it that way, the defense question gets a lot quieter. And while we're handing out credit, we need to talk about Tim Connelly for a second, because this is the part nobody's giving enough credit for. The president of basketball operations didn't just make a splashy trade. He executed a sequence. He turned Randall's salary into cap flexibility through one deal, then weaponized that flexibility to land a star into the next. He kept the team's entire defense identity intact while completely reshaping the offense. He read the exact flaw that was ending his team's seasons and built a multi-step plan to fix it, then actually pulled it off in a span of days. Plenty of front offices had the right idea about what the roster was missing and couldn't get the deals done. Connelly got them done, and not many people are giving him nearly enough credit for the precision of it. Okay, the sacrifice is real. The flaw got solved. Now let's talk about what all that structure actually unlocks. And that's reason number 3. And all of it comes back to one man. Because the biggest thing Minnesota did this summer wasn't simply adding a star to the roster. It was changing what Anthony Edwards has to be every single night. For the entirety of his career, Edwards had to be the engine, the spark, the closer, and the creator. All of it. Every night. Because there was no one else who could reliably do it. Now look at the projected starting 5. Edwards and Ball together in the backcourt, Ayo Dosunmu next to them at the 3, Jenny McDaniels at the 4, Rudy Gobert anchoring the middle, and don't sleep on Dosunmu in that group. Minnesota used most of the cap room from the Randle trade to re-sign him to a 5-year, $112 million deal, which sounds enormous but lands in the mid-20s per year, a perfect fair number for a 26-year-old two-way guard entering his prime. He defends, he passes, he plays to win, and he fits the culture. That's a starting 5 with 2 elite shot creators, a real point attack defender in Dosunmu, the wing stopper in McDaniels, and the rim protector behind all of it. What that does for Edwards is the entire point. When LaMelo is on the floor bending the defense, Edwards gets to be the guy the defense collapses around, instead of the guy generating everything from scratch. He gets to play off a real playmaker for the first time in his career. He gets to attack a defense that's already tilted instead of one that's loaded up on him. And on the nights his shot isn't falling, there's finally a second creator who can carry the offense so the whole thing doesn't collapse. The previous versions of this team gave Edwards talent around him. This version gives him structure. Role players who know their jobs, a co-star who draws the defense away from him, and a system that doesn't live and die on one man's shot making. And the depth doesn't even stop with the starting 5. Remember Isaiah Evans, the sharpshooter they stole at 33? He comes off the bench, and on paper he's exactly the kind of microwave scorer a second unit dreams about. A rookie who can walk in and get hot in a hurry. He still has to prove it at the NBA level, and rookies rarely arrive ready-made. But when a first-round caliber shooter is the guy coming off the bench, that alone tells you how far this roster has climbed. That's the difference between a team that bows out early and a team built to win in the spring. And that's reason number 3 why this is not the same Timberwolves team. Now I want to be honest with you, because I'd be doing you a disservice if I sold you the whole upside and skipped the risks. 3 questions hang over this team, and the answers decide whether this becomes a contender or a cautionary tale. The first is fit. LaMelo is a brilliant offensive talent. He spent his entire career as the centerpiece of bad teams, with the ball in his hands constantly. Edwards needs the ball too, and pairing 2 stars like that in one backcourt is a bet that they make each other better rather than they get in each other's way. There are skeptics across the league who call this a boom or bust, who point at the defense in a 3-guard lineup, who wonder if LaMelo's habits from years of losing translate to winning basketball in May. And honestly, those concerns aren't crazy, but here's the counter argument. The optimistic case is that playing next to a top 5 player inside a defense anchored by Gobert is exactly the environment that smooths those edges. That LaMelo has already shown he'll sacrifice usage when the talent around him is worth deferring to, and that we've simply never seen him in a situation like this before. But right now that's a theory. It's a question, not a guarantee. The second is health. LaMelo was healthy last season, but the 3 years before that were defined by injuries. Minnesota is betting the durable version is the real one. And there's a related wrinkle. Dante DiVincenzo, the floor spacer Edwards specifically said his team missed in the playoffs, is recovering from an Achilles injury and is expected to miss most of next season. That's a big part of why landing a shooter like Evans in the draft mattered so much. Minnesota needed to replace some of the lost spacing, and a rookie sharpshooter is one way to start. But asking a second-round rookie to soak up DiVincenzo's minutes is a lot to count on, and losing that spacing for a year still thins up the margin around the new backcourt. The third is the unfinished roster and the conference it lives in. Moving Randle and Reid left Minnesota without a true power forward, and league sources say they're hunting for one through their trade exceptions or the mid-level. So the picture isn't even fully settled, and none of this happens in a vacuum. Look at what's sitting at the top of the West. Oklahoma City, led by back-to-back MVP SGA, won 64 games last season. San Antonio just rode a 22-year-old Victor Wembanyama all the way to the NBA Finals, with a young supporting cast that's only going to get better. These aren't aging contenders the Wolves can wait out. They're young superpowers that are still ascending. So Minnesota didn't need to just get better. They needed to close a gap on 2 teams that are getting better too. And faster. That's the tall order. That's the whole challenge. The Edwards-LaMelo bet only pays off if it's enough to beat those 2. And nobody can promise you that yet. But here's why this version feels different anyway, despite all of it. They identified the exact flaw that kept ending their seasons. And they paid a real, painful price to fix it. They turned salary into flexibility flexibility into a star, kept their defensive backbone intact, and added shooting on top. Whether you love every piece or not, there's a clear plan, aimed directly at the thing holding them back. That's not panic, that's conviction. And conviction executed this cleanly is exactly what separates a team that's stuck from a team that's about to take a leap. So here's where we are. A real second star next to Anthony Edwards for the first time in his career. An elite defensive spine still fully in place. New shooting. A front office that just went all in. This still isn't the prohibitive favorite in a brutal Western Conference, and I'm not going to insult you by pretending it is. But a Western Conference final appearance no longer feels like the ceiling for this group. It feels closer to the floor of what they're chasing. And underneath all of it is the thing that really matters to this franchise. Minnesota is not a glamorous market. They don't win bidding wars in free agency. The only way to keep a generational talent like Anthony Edwards for his entire career is by building a real contender around him before he ever has a reason to look somewhere else. Right now, Ant is happy because they keep getting close. This LaMelo trade is the front office's answer to the quiet fear that lives in every small market building. That one day close stops being good enough. Get this right, and it's not just the move that broke their playoff ceiling. It might be remembered as the move that kept Anthony Edwards in Minnesota and brought this franchise the first championship in its history. And here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. The real test is OKC and San Antonio, the two teams that have ended Minnesota's season and will be waiting again in the spring. So tell me in the comments, can the Edwards and LaMelo backcourt actually get past those two? Or is this a pairing that looks better in June than it will in May? Let me know where you land.